Welcome to the Butterfly Effect. I'm Chris Horner. This is stage 10 of the Giro d'Italia 2023. I told you guys yesterday on Beyond the Coverage that it was going to be sharks in the water starting stage 10 because at 192 kilometers, lumpy and bumpy with a category 2 climb that's about 33 kilometers long. Not exactly all the way going up stiff as a category 2, but the last few kilometers will be definitely stiff. And at 33, 32 kilometers long, that's a lot of time spent going uphill. But it's going to average under 3% for most of that 33, 32 kilometers of climbing early in today's race. So like I said, more lumpy and bumpy than just one big old category 2 climb. But they'll drop down that, and it's going to be a technical descent. And they'll have one more bump just under 3 kilometers, but at about 8%. So that's a little bit more of a stiff climb. When you look at it on paper, when I was talking about on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage, I said with the sharks in the water, so much climbing on today's stage, there'd be attacks all over the place. Ineos tactically had to play everything smart. Cover big attacks with multiple sprinter teams in there. Let everything small go up the road because the sprinter teams will pull it back. Now, when we get into the racing and the cameras come on, it's raining all over the place. You see the two little Bora Hansgrohe kids all wrapped up tight in their rain gear. Their parents have certainly taken care of these two kids on a rainy day here at the Giro. But we start looking at the directors talking, and they all have their mask on. So COVID protocols are being more enforced now from stage 10 on in the Giro d'Italia since Remco Evenepoel, while wearing the pink jersey, left after the last stage 9 individual time trial. There was a big time meeting, though, between the riders and the organizers on this stage 10, trying to get the stage neutralized down to the last 70 kilometers of the stage, because supposedly it was incredibly cold at the top of the category 2 climb and freezing conditions. So they had a big powwow, and eventually it was decided that the race was going to start and roll out. Nobody really knows from the commentators at GCN what was going to happen exactly in today's stage when they even began to roll out. But I can tell you, once they start rolling, it's hard to get the Peloton stopped because a lot of guys love these conditions. A lot of guys really love the conditions when it's raining and miserable because they know a lot of guys are going to sit up and quit. And if they can get away from the Peloton, they have a shot at winning a stage at the Giro. If they make it start with only 70 kilometers to go, it's going to be a field sprint, right? That's not what a lot of these guys want here at the Giro because they want to win a Giro stage before 2023 season comes to an end here. So once we get into the neutral section, we see Primož Roglič. He's having a little bit of bike problems. He'll come back to the back of the Peloton just as they're hitting kilometer 0, but it looks like they held up the race for the Slovenian rider sitting second on the general classification. Now, Team Ineos, after we get under kilometer 0 and the gun's going to start, you got to ask yourself, what will Geraint Thomas in the race leader's pink jersey, what will he do to handle the beginning of this race? Well, right away, DSM is one of the first riders attacking, and that is a sprinter team. So, like I said on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage, the sprinter team's plan A is going to be to try to get someone in the breakaway here early on this stage 10, and we're seeing this right away with DSM being aggressive at the start. Now, we're about 92 kilometers to go, so we're very early in this 194 kilometer stage when we start seeing a big, solid attack of about 6 guys going up the road. We got Derek G in there, the Israel Premier Tech Canadian rider who's already gone second on the stage just 2 stages earlier than this stage 10. So we know he's got form, and Alessandro Di Marquez in there. Now we got a couple quick step riders in there because Remco Evenepoel's gone home, and now they're trying to get riders up the road to try to be able to win a stage here for quick step and make it 3 to go along with the 2 individual time trials with Remco Evenepoel. So all the quick step riders got the free card to go up the road, and they got 2 in this break of 6-7 riders. Trek Segafredo are represented up here with Gabriel Xavier, and with him up there, that means that's another sprinter team, right? So Jaco Lula's in there with Alessandro Di Marquez, Michael Matthews' team. Trek Segafredo's represented in there, Mads Pedersen's team. And then Pseudo Quickstep's represented in there, Davide Ballerini, who's a sprinter under these kind of conditions and could get you a solid result. So Quickstep are all going in on the breakaway. Trek Segafredo the breakaway, DSM the breakaway. We're going to see some attacks from Bahrain Victoria, so we know they're playing the breakaway here early in this stage 10 because Johnny Milan is not going to be their first card to play here on stage 10. So with all these breaks going up the road, we see 6 guys that's solid up there and then some chasing from behind. Now, all of a sudden up front, we start seeing with about 10, 11 kilometers later, once we start getting into about 180K to go, all of a sudden, Alessandro Di Marche and Derek G from Israel Premier Tech, they throw down the gauntlet and they drop everyone. Last guys to come off is the pseudo quick step rider there, Matteo Cattaneo, as he's getting dropped. We got 2 guys going up the road. Now behind, there's been attacks a little bit left and right here and there, but the Peloton would slow down. Then these 2 riders would get out to about a 30-second gap. As the Peloton's coming curb to curb, look just all the way over there to the right side, just as the driveway starts to open up. That's Magnus Cort Nielsen right there. He's going to slide up and move up just a little more spots to the front there for EF Education. Not quite make it to the front, and then once the next driveway comes, all of a sudden we see Geraint Thomas, look over to the right. You can't see Magnus Cort Nielsen. That's further because he's out of the picture. But as soon as the next driveway opens up, Magnus Cort Nielsen, EF Education, throws in a massive attack, and you see him come straight over the top of the professional Peloton here at the Giro because EF Education know this is a solid chance to win a stage here at the Giro for Magnus Cort Nielsen to go along with Ben Healy's stage earlier here at the Giro. Now, what's going to happen next? Well, we got one more rider that's interested, and it's Iolo Cometa. He's wearing the KOM jersey, so it's Davide Baez that's going to throw in the next attack. These 2 riders are going to take a little bit of time before they finally get up to the 2 riders in front to get 4 riders with 150 kilometers to go up front. Derek G's up there, Alessandro Di Marche, Magnus Cort Nielsen, and Davide Baez to put 4 guys at the front of the Peloton on stage 10. Now behind, I saw some little curious tactics, but Ineos are playing it perfect, right? Remember yesterday I said they don't want to be in small moves, but when other attacks were going, trying to get across, when they got a little bit bigger, you would see Ineos in that move, and then you would see Jumbo-Visma in that move because Ineos is in that move. So both Ineos and Jumbo-Visma watching each other on today's stage and tactically have been perfect to this point in time. Now with those 4 riders up front, that gap's getting up to about 4 minutes. And behind, it's Movistar. Movistar is the first team to come to the front and start controlling things. A little bit of chaos in the Peloton this whole time as riders are starting to come back from the back of the group that got split off during all the early attacks. But Movistar have it all wrapped up and looks like they're going to make this a field sprint here on stage 10 if they can keep it all together. Well, they start going up the official part of the KOM here because they've been climbing all day. Like I said, it's 32 kilometers long here on stage 10. So Movistar is going a steady pace up. Now all of a sudden, Gaviria decides near the top of the KOM, about a few kilometers still away, he's going to pull over to the right side of the road and he's going to start changing his rain gear. This is when things start getting difficult for the sprinter teams to be able to win today's stage, because once you have Movistar pulling over and Gaviria is having problems, you look at his director sportif there, that's Max Schiandri, my old teammate from FDJ, that's wrapped around the back there trying to help Gaviria zip him up while one of the other staff is trying to help get his jacket all the way through his left arm there. The reason it is these clothing are made so tight nowadays so to be aerodynamic, but the problem is once you're wet and sticky, you just can't get through these clothes, so it takes 3 people to put on a jacket. Now, Gaviria finally gets going. He's got one teammate waiting for him. Then as he starts coming up to the back end of the cars and he's in the caravan there, we see he's getting another jacket on, again having problems getting his hand through the jacket. Now this is going to cause big time problems because you're taking another sprinter team out of the mix. Already you have Jaco Alula, Alessandro Di Marche in that front group, so that's one sprinter team that's taken out of the mix here. Now you have Movistar that are hesitating, waiting back there while Gaviria gets his act all put back together with the right clothing so he can stay warm. Problem is they're going over the top of the KOM, and up front you got the GC teams, Ineos, Jumbo-Visma, and UAE Team Emirates going full gas just the last 500 meters of this climb so that they can go over the top and start to descent in a perfect position. Up to that time, it was DSM riding a solid tempo, but not so solid that they were trying to drop Gaviria. But now with the speed of the GC teams fighting to go over the top to be in good position, we see Mark Cavendish, Team Astana, coming out the back as he's suffering. Now the British rider will find his way back on with just about most of everybody else. But when we're coming down the descent, it's Gaviria that goes off to the right side of the road, and he must have crashed here as we see the bikes being swapped again with his staff back there from Movistar. This is going to be a problem because now you've completely lost Movistar for any chance of helping out later to pull the 4 riders up the road. Now, when those 4 riders went over the top of the KOM, though, Davide Baez took maximum KOM points. That's why he's in the blue KOM leaders jersey. Then he sits up going down the descent. I assume he didn't have any problem, but they didn't catch it on camera. They just showed Davide Baez going back. So that's leaving 3 riders at the front of the peloton here at the Giro going full gas. 3 solid riders, right? Derek Guy, Alessandro Di Marche, and Magnus Cort Nelson from EF Education, the mustache king up there as he's displaying it in full view here on stage 10. Now these 3 riders are bombing down this descent, and things are going to get tricky back here because all of a sudden, guess what? Well, Bahrain Victorious decide they can get a little gap on the rest of the peloton back there. So we got Pasqualon, the lead out man for Johnny Milan, who's back there on his wheel going full gas. They have their GC rider, Damiano Caruso, in this group. And then Ineos got a guy too. Pavel Sivakov is in this group. So with 4 guys up there and 2 a threat on the general classification, you know the speeds are going to be going fast back there in the peloton, full gas. And that's going to cause more chaos because let me remind you, you got sprinter teams off the back like Mark Cavendish from Astana. So if he's chasing full gas, getting tired, and his teammates are chasing on the front for him, getting tired, well, that's going to make it a difficult stage 10 when you got to bring back 3 strong riders in the front. Now, as we come down the bump there, we're going to see Pasqualon, and he's solo, got a little gap back there on Johnny Milan. Then we're going to find out why. Well, they took maximum risk going down this descent, and Johnny Milan must have crashed somewhere, but they caught it off camera. You'll just see him later with his side jacket all ripped up. Come just around that same time that Johnny Milan was crashing, well, UAE Team Emirates, Jay Vine wasn't having much luck either because he crashed going into the left turn, slid all the way against the brick building there on the right side, and that's going to cost him any chance of winning the Giro d'Italia or finishing high up on the classification because UAE Team Emirates rider Jay Vine is going to lose a lot of time at the end of today's stage 10 as he's out of the picture for the moment. Now I want to back the film up just all the way back to the beginning because I left one important rider off. It was Alexander Vlasov when all the attacks started that was at the back of the peloton because he'd been feeling sick. So that's why you don't see any teammates around him. And Alexander Vlasov, who was sitting top 10 here in the general classification, he won't finish today's stage, so he's out of the Giro d'Italia, along with Jay Vine out of the top 10, but not out of the Giro d'Italia. Now up front, just as we start the small little KOM Category 4, under 3 kilometers long, Bahrain Victorious is going to get wrapped up because Team Ineos is going to pull everything back. This was a ridiculous knucklehead move that had no reason to actually employ this technique. First off, Pavel Sivakov's not going to work in this group because Caruso's higher than him on the general classification, so he doesn't have a whole lot of reason. So unless Johnny Milan and Pascal Ackermann can close up that 2.5-3 minute gap to the 3 riders up front, you're not going to get any help at this point in time. And if you got one rider, Pavel Sivakov, sitting on getting a free ride, the chemistry is just not going to gel well in this front group, so it never had any chance. Ineos themselves were the ones to pull it back after Pavel Sivakov dropped out of this group. I assume taking less risk going down the descent. Then his teammates pull everything back as we come into the smaller last Category 4 climb of today's stage. Now going over the top of the climb, it's Derek Guy going over with a solid gap of about 2 minutes and 20 seconds, those 3 riders on the peloton behind. Now, what's going to happen coming down this next descent? We're going to see another crash from Trek Segafredo riders, 2 of them coming into the right turn. One rider looked like the front wheel slipped out and both Trek Segafredo riders went down. That's another sprinter team that's out and can't get to the front at this moment because the pace is just too hard and fast on the descents. Now, was the racing crazy fast and hard throughout the whole day? Not really. It was a little bit difficult at the first 15, 20, 25 kilometers. But after that, once Movistar was sitting on the front, the pace was pretty good. But once we started going down the descents, they were so dangerous, that's what's really causing the carnage here. Now, all of a sudden, 55 kilometers to go, we're going to see two riders going down. One Arkea Samsic rider in the upper right side of the road there, and then in the left side there, we're going to see it's Jayco Alula rider that's down. All of a sudden, we see one of the staff members in the car jumping out of the car. We see him grab the Jayco Alula bike. He's going to put it against the concrete wall there on the right side of the road, and then he's going to run right past the front end of his car, not look to see if anybody's coming, and pow! There we go. We see it's EF Education's Alberto Bettiol, who was trying to get back up to the front of the Peloton as he comes shooting between the cars on the left side and the right side of the road parked. That staff member that was driving the car ran straight out in the road, and Alberto Bettiol nailed him straight on. Alberto Bettiol goes flying off his bike down on the concrete, jumps up. He's all upset. The staff organizer person there that caused the crash is looking at him trying to explain why it's not his fault. Knucklehead, it is your fault. You're in a bike race and you didn't look left up the road to see what was coming, because what was coming was EF Education's Alberto Bettiol, and he was going full gas. Now, Alberto Bettiol's losing it. He's walking all the way to the left side of the road while his bike's on the right, and then all of a sudden he's turning around and walking back across the road. And while he was doing that, he almost got hit by a couple riders coming through himself for what looked like not paying a whole lot of attention, which is why he went down in the first place too. Now, all three of those riders will get up and going. The cameras will go back to the back end of that crash, and we see it's another Arkea Samsic rider back there. This time it's Warren Barguil who went down. Now, possibly he went down first, or possibly he went down with all this carnage of cars stopping in the middle of the road and nobody having any brakes, nobody being able to see because it's dark, wet, freezing. Of course, you can't feel your brakes or anything like that because your fingers are frozen. So Warren Barguil went down hard. Looked like he was going to get in the car, but instead he gets back on his bike, but he is definitely hurting here on stage 10 of the Giro. Now, we'll fast forward and we'll get back up to what's going on in the front of the Peloton after all that carnage was happening with about 50 kilometers to go. This is when the road's starting to flatten out. Three riders in front still got about a 2-minute gap, and they look like they're throwing down hard. Now, when we look back at the Peloton, it's three teams chasing. DSM, Quick Step, and Bahrain Victorious are on the front. But this is not a lot of force. It's three riders chasing three riders up front. And I can tell you for a fact, it is not easy coming down these descents. It's not like they're resting coming down these descents. And that's why we'd seen so much carnage. So these three riders left at the front now to pull back three riders that are in the breakaway up the road with more than a 2-minute gap. This is not the right kind of numbers you want to see. 10 kilometers go by. We're about 40 kilometers to go. Team Astana's Mark Cavendish. I said yesterday on Beyond the Coverage, there's no way Mark Cavendish can win today's stage. He won't even make it over the climb. Well, he's made it back on. He did get dropped going over the climb, but he has somehow made it back on, and Astana are on the front. 4 teams pull it. Only problem, again, it's just one rider from each team on the front. Now, as riders start dropping off, all of a sudden, we'll start seeing finally second riders coming from the same teams as we see Gianni Moscon from Astana jump on the front. Now, he hasn't been on the front yet, but like I said, this has not been some limo ride all the way to 35 kilometers to go, and the gap is still at about a minute and 30 seconds to the three riders up front. So they're going full gas up front, and they're doing everything they can in the back to chase. But because of all the chaos and everyone's tactical mistakes here on stage 10, starting with wanting to full-on commit to being in the break, then committing with Movistar trying to bring it back for a field sprint, and then Bahrain Victorious for some reason trying to blow everything up on the descent, which just tires everybody's legs out for no reason. Now you got nobody left up front. We start coming into 15 kilometers to go. It's the descent for the three riders up front. They got a 45-second gap still as they're going full gas. And then behind, there's another crash. Now, this crash was a bit crazy because they're coming into this right turn with a lot of speed. You see the Bahrain Victorious rider slide off the road, go all the way across the road and off to the left side of the road. And then just behind, Jumbo Visma's Gloag. Gloag is doing everything he can to avoid crashing. He's had enough incidents here at the Giro d'Italia, and this is only stage 10. Now, he doesn't want to go down again, so he's setting the bike straight up. He's slowing it down as much as he can, doing a straight line because he knows he'll lose those tires if he starts to turn the bike. Gets it slowed down just enough to do what I call an uncontrollable dismount. Not quite a crash per se, because if you didn't fall down yourself, he steps over the handlebars and has the fencing there just on the left side as he grabs it, and it holds him up. I love uncontrollable dismounts, and I'll take them over a crash any day and time. Up front, the Peloton, it's a small size group, guys. 60, 70 riders max. It's tiny. And again, they don't have much help up front. Everybody's starting to blow. We hit with 6 kilometers to go. There's this bridge going over. The gap's at about 40, 45 seconds to the 3 leaders. Derek G, Israel Premier Tech's full gas over this bump. And then we see Gianni Moscon. He's going to blow, come straight out the back of the Peloton. That means there's nobody really left at the front because there's just one rider up there, Pasqualone. He's pulling as hard as he can. Trek Segafredo will jump up there again from time to time. But once we get under 2.5 kilometers to go, it's just the general classification. Favorite teams at the front. UAE team members got a few numbers up there because they got a lot of numbers back there with Jay Vine and a huge chase group back there, so they don't have too many guys left with 2.5 kilometers to wrap around Almeida. But Jumbo-Visma's represented and Ineos have everything under control here while wearing the pink jersey for the first time for Geraint Thomas in his career. It's just under 2.5 kilometers to go. We'll start seeing some more help up there as one more Bahrain victorious rider gets on the front. Pasqualone trying to do that emergency last ditch of effort like he did earlier stages here at the Giro, and then hoping that the 3 riders up front start playing some games. Well, they're going to start playing games at about 2.1 kilometers to go. It's Derek G on the front. He throws the elbow there, and Alessandro Di Marchi does not want to come through. Derek G pulls over to the left. He looks right, and now Alessandro Di Marchi remembers when he came up short a couple stages back and they got caught by the Peloton, so he rotates through. As he starts pulling, we're going to see at 1.6 kilometers to go, Derek G throws in the first big attack amongst the breakaway riders here on stage 10 as he's got a gap. We look over the left side of the road. Magnus Cort Nelson is looking over. He's looking over at Alessandro Di Marchi. And what does Di Marchi do? Di Marchi starts to close the gap. The Jaco Alula rider gets on the front. He starts pulling hard. He's got Magnus Cort Nelson on his wheel. One fast cookie here when we're talking about 3 riders left at the Giro d'Italia, and he's about almost a pure sprinter. So with Alessandro Di Marchi on the front pulling 100%, Magnus Cort Nelson's getting a free ride. All of a sudden, Alessandro Di Marchi, he needs a little help. He can't close the gap to G up front. And then we see Magnus Cort Nelson jump Alessandro Di Marchi. He'll start to bridge the gap up to Derek Gee, the Israel Premier Tech rider, and he'll close. We look behind. Alessandro Di Marchi got left behind. But we look more up front. They're starting to play some games amongst the 2 of them. So Alessandro Di Marchi will close up with about 500 meters to go. Now, what's happening right at the very front? Well, Magnus Cort Nelson's still sitting second wheel. All of a sudden, we're going to see Derek G. He's going to start pulling on the front. Not 100%. He's not throwing everything into it, but he's throwing enough into it that Magnus Cort Nelson is still getting a free ride back there. Now about 350 meters to go. All of a sudden, Di Marchi throws in his attack at just over 350 meters to go. He starts but gets nowhere as Derek G is the first one to close the gap, but Magnus Cort Nelson is sitting third wheel in the driver's seat here coming into 150 meters to go. Now Magnus Cort Nelson throws in his attack just under 150 meters to go. We see at 100 meters to go, it's Alessandro Di Marchi first to crack from the back, so we know one rider's out for a chance to win. And then 25 meters later, Derek G, he throws in the towels. He looks back to see if he could still get second. The head's still down up front with Magnus Cort Nelson driving all the way to the line. Then he sits up and wins a second stage victory here at the Giro 2023 for EF Education. And to round out a stage victory at all 3 of the Grand Tours in the European Peloton. One at the Tour de France, one at the Tour of Spain, and now one at the Giro d'Italia. Congratulations, Magnus Cort Nelson. That was a display in tactical genius all the way from under 2 kilometers to go to the finish because Alessandro Di Marchi closed the gap. Derek G rode on the front forever all the way into the finish, and then Magnus Cort Nelson cleaned up, taking everything except for the kitchen sink here at the finish of stage 10 to get himself up on the podium with a stage victory at the Giro d'Italia. What happened behind? Well, those guys all blew up. Like I said, the sprinter teams just did not tactically ride today's race smart or intelligent, especially not that Bahrain victorious attack coming down that final real descent that tried to blow everything up and caused chaos all over the place. but they'll come into the line. We'll see Johnny Milan, who started his sprint way too early here on stage 10, and he'll get passed by Mads Pedersen, who will round out the top 4 places here on stage 10, and he'll gain some more points in the sprint competition against Johnny Milan. So Trek Segafredo at least salvaged something out of today's race. But realistically, when you break down the tactics, it was a nightmare out there for the sprinter teams. They were ridiculous. Jumbo-Visma, they did a fine job. And of course, Ineos rode tactically smart, exactly the way I wanted to see it on yesterday's Beyond the Coverage when I said cover the moves that are big, but don't cover them unless you have sprinter teams all over stacked up inside there. Otherwise, it's going to be a waste of energy. Mark Cavendish, hats off to you. I didn't think you'd be a player in today's race, but you brought it all the way down to about 40 seconds to go with just a few kilometers left and left today's stage 10 as a nail-biter to the finish. Great day to be sitting on the Chesterfield. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you for stage 11 of the Giro d'Italia on tomorrow's race.